All right, we're going to go over periods of sine and cosine function. So that's going to be enough information about transformation, but more just the information about the sine and cosine graph. Now, the definition or the concept for period is the period of a sinusoidal function is the distance between any two sets of repeating points on the graph of the function. So let's go over to the picture on the right. The period is where you see the starting point and the end point where, as you can see, they're level, meaning that they're at the same y value or at the same horizontal level. So if you see that, one graph is what repeating, then there's a period. So for example, um, if you were to start at the bottom, the minimum of a sine or a cosine graph, and you see there's another minimum, so you go from the first bottom part or the first minimum to the next bottom or minimum, then that's your period. That's one cycle right there. So that's basically what it is. Now you would have a better, clear image on what a period look like as we practice on some examples. So it might sound confusing right now, even with the picture that's given in the book. Now, once you practice, you see how you're going to be able to identify what a period is on a sine and cosine graph. Now, the symbol, or basically the formula for a period, as stated, for y equals a sine of bx plus c plus d, and y equals a cosine of bx plus c plus d, where b is not 0, period is equal to 2 pi over the absolute value of b. So when you find your b value, which is the coefficient of x, you take the absolute value of it and you put it as the denominator below 2 pi. Now, if b is a decimal number or a whole number, then you're going to be fine. If it's a fraction, then you still have to simplify it after you find the absolute value of b. So again, if it's a whole number and maybe decimal number, then you're fine once you find your period. But if it's a fraction, you basically going to have 2 pi over a fraction. You still have to simplify that. Can't just leave it like that. Now, there's a little bit of information about periods of sine and cosine function. To graph a sinusoidal function of the form y equals sine of bx and y equals cosine of bx, find the period of the function and successively add period over 4. So what period that you find, you divide it by 4 and add it to the left endpoint of an interval with that length. Then use these values as the x values for the key points on the graph. So once you find your period, so essentially what this information is saying, once you find your period, if you want to find your next period to the right, find the next period to the left, then successfully add what your period is, divide by 4, what value that you got after you divide by 4, you add it to the left, you add it to the right of the graph, so that way you're able to find these x values when you're graphing using periods. Now, it might sound confusing, but once we've practiced by hand, you'll get the hang of it and see a clearer picture on how to do this.